What's up, everybody? My name is Alex, and I am your host here on the Swole Friends podcast, as well as the co-founder and COO here at Swolverine. Swolverine is an endurance athlete and active lifestyle brand. We have over 33 different performance powders and daily health supplements that are all proprietary blend-free, clinically dosed, and scientifically proven effective. We also offer one-on-one nutrition coaching, online personal training, and competitive fitness programming in the functional and CrossFit space for athletes looking to pursue their ultimate athletic potential. Here on the Swole Friends, episode 34, I am very excited to welcome my guest, Sarah Granetz. She is a competitive powerlifter. She has an MBA. She's a strength coach and a total fitness enthusiast. She's got a rockin' body. She's got a big old brain, and I'm super excited to just sit down and chat with her so that we can share how she takes a unique approach to helping women learn how to lift weights, learn how to not be afraid of the gym, to help grow muscle and feel confident and capable. So whether you're tuning in for the first time or for the 34th time, we're excited to have you. And Sarah, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Oh my goodness. Talk to me. Okay, so I'll back up. A lot of times I have people on here that I have met in person or met along the journey. And honestly, I've been following you for a bit, and I love your tone. I love the way that you talk to your community. I love the way that you share information, the way that you're just like, hey, this is what's going on. This is how it is. Here's what you can do. Now go do something with this information. And so that's a big, big reason why I want to sit down and chat with you. And so how did you get to coaching? I mean, you have an MBA, you're educated, you're an influencer. Just kind of give us the backstory on you.
Sure. Well, thank you for that very warm introduction. So I think I've always been athletic my entire life. Always had to play a sport in school, and I really gravitated towards running when I was younger. Running is one of those great solo sports. You can do it anywhere. It's free, right? It's really good for our mental health as well. What ended up happening as I got older was I took the running a little too far. So coupled with an eating disorder and too much running, it became just unmanageable. And what ended up happening was I had to kind of take a step back and say, what can I do that won't kind of snowball into too many miles, right? Too many joints, too many concerns for my health. I ended up being injured, and I literally had to say, okay, what am I going to do? And that's when I started lifting weights. And I really kind of fell in love with this idea of, instead of focusing on my mile times, how much can I lift safely in my, living room of my New York City apartment with my little set of dumbbells. So it's always been an athletic desire for both mental and physical health. And then once I started lifting, I felt like I was just introduced to this whole other world. And after being kind of, like I said, not really having the tools to eat properly, to know what was appropriate, when you start to lift weights, the need for fuel is very much there. It's very similar to running, right? You stop performing, but I found that it was a little easier for me to connect the dots with nutrition once I started lifting. So that's when I really started to become more educated, more curious. And that's actually when I hired a coach of my own. I thought I wanted to compete in bodybuilding. Definitely not for me, which is totally fine. Everyone has their path. That is not mine. But what it taught me was, it showed me that there was a lot I didn't understand fully about how to kind of grow muscle and still kind of deal with the past of the eating disorder, right, in a productive way, to say, this is what I used to do. That's not working anymore. Let's do something better. But also understanding that there isn't a single path. Even if you want to go and lift weights, that can look very different, right? If you're a weightlifter, power lifter, or you're just enjoying yourself in the gym. So what ended up happening after that experience was that I said, you know what? I want to be my own coach. I want to be a coach too. I want to take everything that I loved from that, and I want to make it better. I want to improve on the relationships that I had with my coach, with that company. And I want to help more women with more of a focus on getting strong, and how nutrition is really the starting point to that, right? It's not secondary. If we fuel ourselves right from the get-go, then the lifting is it's just fun.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's nothing worse than like going in to like crush some weights and you feel like crap, and you're yawning through a workout and you're like, this is 10 times harder than it needs to be. And it's already 10 times hard, right?
Right. And what I hear a lot is from my clients and my prospective clients is that they actually, it's not so much an issue of discipline or motivation. They're going to the gym, but they're not really seeing the results that they're looking for. And unfortunately, ultimately, that's really a nutrition piece, right? Because we could all go to the gym and use a million different machines and potentially get the similar results if we're all eating appropriately, meaning enough carbs, enough protein. So it's not like there isn't a will or a desire to, be there, to show up, to work hard, but feeling like there's these constant disconnect between what was happening. And since I was coming, unfortunately, from such a lean, small place, that was not really something that I was dealing with. The results were quite fast because, like I said, I healed from that. But learning more about really the nutrition is the missing piece. And actually, if anything, it should be the starting piece.
Mm-hmm. Right? Like before you step in the gym. And then you have kind of the idea of like genetic factors where you can outrun your fork for a long time, or some people can. Right?
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you get like I'm not trying to generalize, but kind of, right? Like the 40, 45-year-old person who's had some kids and professionally successful, and then is like, wait, what do you mean I have like this look or this feeling, or I don't remember what it's like to eat food and know what it feels like. Right.
Yeah.
And we go this long spectrum. Whereas the other side of things, we can also abuse that in the sense of like, I just eat what I want because I don't know what to eat. And I just do it, and I do it because it feels good. And then I have emotional coping strategies. And then all of a sudden I'm really overweight and I don't remember what it feels like to be able to go walk and not feel out of breath, or right. So we have a lot of extremes that we live in. And interesting enough for you, right? And any nutrition coach out there, a lot of them, we all have our own stories, right?
Mm-hmm.
We all have our own motivators and things. And you came from a side that was also an extreme, right? Like being a really successful runner, you have to be really lean. You can't have like a lot of muscle mass on you. And
Mm-hmm.
speaking to that, do you find that with the image of social media, you attract a specific type of client, or is it a little across the board because you're speaking more to the emotional, mental aspect of things, not necessarily like, oh, are you overweight? Oh, are you super skinny? I don't like saying a lot of those words, but those are what a lot of our listeners are familiar with. So that's what I'm saying.
Of course. So my one-on-ones tend to fall into two buckets, either younger women, and I'll say younger as in under 40, who are looking to grow muscle. Like I said, maybe they're already in the gym, maybe they're focused more on cardio, maybe no one's literally ever told them how to use the machine, how to pick up a barbell, anything like that, who are looking to kind of take more of the skinny fat aesthetic into a leaner, meaner, stronger, muscle making machine, whatever that means to them, right? We all have different aesthetics that we deem the goal. And then I have my women over 40 who are kind of experiencing these hormonal changes, may or may not have had some children, like you were saying, and basically just coming to the point where they want to feel strong and they want to age well. So also, once again, what that means for them, whether that means being able to finish the bedroom that they're redoing with their husband in their house and crouching down on the floor and being on their knees, right? Or whether that means running marathons. So I think there's just such a lack of education around hormones in general and how to best fuel ourselves. But also those two populations, they're very different answers as well. So I do like to try and have an even balance between my younger women and my older women, because I think I want to help everyone. But I do think that there's struggles, right? Each kind of group, if you will, has their own struggles. And with the younger women, it really does tend to be kind of very much based on the difficulty of eating more, wanting to see sometimes results faster than actually is technically humanly possible, right? And with some of the older women, it's other life kind of responsibilities that may or may not be within our control, right? A partner who relies on us, maybe it's children who still live at home, maybe it's running 4 businesses, what have you. So I think that's really how I like to kind of market, if you will, on social media to those two groups. I've been that younger girl who was terrified to lose weight. I used to fight with my coach whenever she would raise my calories. So I joke about that, but I think it's really important to kind of meet someone where they are and understand this is what we know, right? From a data perspective, right? This is what you can expect, but this is everything that we're going to monitor weekly. So, making sure that everyone's happy and comfortable. Every minute of these journeys is not amazing. It's just not. But when we zoom out, I like to say, really the goal should be food freedom, ability to walk into a gym, feel confident doing whatever form of exercise really, that we really truly enjoy. Because I think that's also very important. I would never say that someone shouldn't run or shouldn't do CrossFit. It's just, let's make sure you're fueling properly to do that and to do the strength training.
Yeah. And our bodies are amazing things, right? And when we do fuel, and when we say fuel, like when you eat enough calories or
Right.
macronutrients, calories to support your activity,
Yeah.
you can do a lot of things.
Right.
And it doesn't become like, oh, I'm limited because of that sport. It
Mm-hmm.
becomes like, I am enabled because of my body.
Right.
Right. And that's a really, really big shift. And you mentioned the word food freedom,
Mm-hmm.
right? So explain to maybe one of our listeners, I'll let you take the floor on what is food freedom to you and what would that look like in somebody's life if they're seeking that?
Sure. So once again, I think there's probably a few different definitions, but I think the most kind of basic would be feeling comfortable ordering, cooking, preparing a meal, regardless of what it is, right? So if you really enjoy pizza, being able to actually go out for pizza with your best friend and not have any negativity, right? No food anxiety, no food guilt, no 3-hour Stairmaster session the next morning, to
Yeah.
actually be able to fully be present and enjoy food in the moment without guilt, shame, and potentially exercise to try and, negate that food. And it doesn't have to be pizza, right? For some of us, sitting down to a proper meal at any given point, regardless of what it is, can be very hard. So I think the contents are less important, but it's more about being able to educate ourselves and say, this is a balanced meal, or this is a meal that, isn't that nutrient dense, but I really like it. And that's okay. So for me, actually tracking my food and learning more about macronutrients and micronutrients was what got me to that freedom, because before I had no concept of what my plate should look like, right? How much protein, how much carbs, how much fat. And I use tracking as an education tool with my clients to say, this is what we want, this is what we're going for in each meal. So we can get to the point where in a few months, maybe in a year, we don't need to track, because we can make ourselves a plate and know exactly what should be on it, should being balanced. And if we want to enjoy something that, like I said, isn't as nutrient dense, we know that maybe before the meal, we've gotten all of our protein, we've gotten enough healthy fat, so we still feel satisfied. Or maybe we're going over on the carbs because we're going to do it leg day, but it's not a leg day to negate the carbs. It's a positive association. So for me, food freedom is a positive association regardless of the food type. And that's something I really try to give to my clients. Once again, we all have very complicated relationships with food, but what I do find is when we're able to remove emotions with the tracking, with the do I have fat, do I have protein, do I have carbs, that's really where the magic happens, when we stop saying, oh, I feel like this, I feel like that, right? Because most people don't feel like not everyone feels like going to the gym, eating healthy every day. But when we try to make sure that most of the time we're doing those things and taking care of ourselves in whatever way that might be, that's really where we can enjoy the 20% time, right? If you're doing the 80-20 approach to healthy living, or really just learn that food is fuel, like you were saying, and it's not punishment. It's not a reward. I think that can be really, it doesn't just happen.
Mm-hmm. Well, and kind of going back to a previous point, it's not a matter of your motivation. It's not a matter of your willpower. I see that one a lot. Oh, that one grinds. But you know what I mean? It's not a matter of your willpower a lot of times to do something. It's a matter of like your understanding of why you're doing that thing. Well, why do I have to eat carbs? Oh, it's because it helps me build muscle and have energy for my muscles to do the leg press. Like, well, that makes a lot more sense than saying like this banana is bad.
Yeah.
And a lot of people have been taught this banana is bad. Bananas are bad. Bananas are shit. Don't eat them. I'm going to beat you over the head with this banana. Yeah. And you're like, no, wait, let's talk about what's in a banana and when to have a banana so that you can use those energies and you can use the, I said that wrong, energy from that food to support your activity, right? And then all of a sudden bananas aren't the bad guy. It's like culture. It's the marketing message. It's this like common, and I know you face this too, and as coaches, and we can talk about this probably for the rest of the episode, we won't, but the marketing messages of like, you're bad, there's something wrong with you, do this, don't do that, color in these lines, don't color out of those. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden we're like, what the hell is wrong with me? Like, why should I have a banana? They're terrible for you. Mm-hmm. It's like, you're not broken. There's nothing wrong with you. You've been taught that there's something wrong with you to sell you a product. Right.
Right.
And a lot of times too, I mean, it's this stigma that we're seeing shift, I think, with the help of social media of getting women in the gym.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you deserve to be on that chest machine just as much as any other man. You
Right.
have muscles too. Let's
Right.
use it. You know what I mean? They're great. They're great for pushing, pulling, holding, opening doors. Like, I mean, amazing functional things. And just because they're functional in some chest day doesn't mean you have to go do some functional sport like CrossFit, right? So then we're not having all these things like, ooh, do this, don't do that. And I'm sure you face that a lot in your conversations with clients and, you know, having the food freedom, but also having the freedom of choice.
Right.
And that's a really empowering thing that as coaches, we're able to extend to clients and share with people like, you're a powerful being. You are a powerful, badass person who has choice in what you're doing.
Right. I also think the discipline element of it, not in a restrictive way, is actually very empowering. So, you know, carving out the time to treat yourself well, once again, whatever that might mean for someone, is very empowering. And it's also, I think it's very important from a mental standpoint as well, right? We can do all this work on our physical selves, but if you still feel like garbage on the inside, or your self-esteem is in, you know, is crap, then it's not gonna be as good as it could be. So I think like this concept that there's good exercises, there's good foods, there's bad foods, there's, you know, part of this journey is figuring out what actually you enjoy and what the client enjoys. And sometimes we have to tear down all these things. Okay, well, why are you so afraid of bananas? Or why do you feel the need to take 25,000 steps a day?
Yeah.
And sometimes it's a bit of, well, I can help you with this, but maybe we need some more professionals in the ring to help with some of this other stuff. Because unfortunately, what ends up happening is we live with these things for so long that sometimes it can be, from an outside perspective, I can say, well, this is where that comes from. But for the actual individual, it's very hard for them to see and connect the dots. And a lot of the times, especially with eating disorders, you're so in that moment of right now, what just happened, versus like I said, being able to zoom out a bit and get some perspective. So I think every client has their own challenges, but living in extremes, like you said, is just, it's hard. And also it's very stressful. It's very stressful on the body.
Oh, absolutely. You know, and chronic systemic inflammation, you know, or feeling bloated and puffy all the time, right? It's like, okay, well, our bodies are wonderful at giving us signs. We're great at not listening to them.
Yeah.
Yes. We're great at saying like, God, my body sucks. It's bloated all the time, rather than being like, maybe it's trying to tell me something, you know?
Right.
Maybe it's trying to tell me like, this food doesn't make me feel good, or that I need water, or I need activity, right?
Yeah.
And so strengthening that relationship between the brain and body, I think, is huge.
Mm-hmm.
And I think too, as a coach, you might experience this, so that people hire a coach to have instant results. They're going to fix my body. Mm-hmm. They're going to get me my abs. They're going to get me my 75-pound weight loss.
Yeah.
They're going to get me to feel better about myself.
Right.
Can you speak to that attitude? Maybe from personal experience, coaching experience, professional side of things.
Mm-hmm.
And, how do we work with people who want instant results? Like, we'll get you results for sure, but blank, what happens when somebody comes into coaching?
Yeah. So I think there's two different types of clients, and I would say kind of two different types of results. I think there's people who have been so discouraged for so long that they just need a sign. Mm-hmm. They need something that says this is the right path, right? So maybe it's they finally start drinking water and their skin is a little bit brighter. Maybe it's they start taking 7,000 steps a day and their clothes are fitting a little better. Maybe it's they're actually excited in the morning to wake up and go work out because they've eaten enough dinner that they actually have the energy to do that. So there's the clients who will take any kind of sign. Mm-hmm. And then I think there's the clients who are really looking for kind of more of those impossible signs, right? The scale dropping within days, their skinny jeans from high school fitting within a week, things like that. Looking in the mirror when we take progress pictures, right, and seeing a transformation that would take months, if maybe years for them, right? Also with understanding that not everyone's 6 weeks is the same 6 weeks, right? What I can do in 6 weeks will be very different from what the next person, and so on and so forth. We're all different. So I think for the people who will take anything, it can be very empowering once they start to feel they're sleeping better, their digestion's better. Those are usually what I see. Even just with these small food tweaks, removing food additives from the diet, or even just saying, I know you like this, maybe can we just eat a little less of it? I can't tell you how many clients come to me and say, I'm allergic to this. And then I look at their food diary and they're eating it 3 times a day. So also sometimes we're our own worst enemies. We say, I don't, this is what I like, or this is what I think I want. So it can be very hard to manage those expectations, but I will say that there's always something kind of in the gut that says what they're asking for is actually not going to be attainable in this few weeks. And it's so refreshing when you actually get someone who has a very realistic timeline. I think part of the beauty of all this is we do it online, right? But you're not actually there with that person. And sometimes someone just really needs to be sat down, and you want to be in the room with them and say, you're doing really great. Like, you don't see this. A lot of the times I have to put the progress pictures next to each other for my clients to be like, oh, I thought nothing was changing. And a lot of that goes, once again, back to this zoomed in. We're so hyper focused on how our jeans are fitting, how our butt is looking, whatever it might be, right? How our abs are. And it can be really hard to pull people out of that and out of that expectation of it has to happen immediately. I think you never want to promise or set a certain expectations, right? You never want to say by month 6, this will happen. But I think trying to put the pressure on these other wins, right? Sleeping better digestion, which are things I try to do with my weekly check-in. So it's not just, what did the scale say? And if you don't want to get on the scale, you don't have to, because I'm not getting on it. So I don't expect you to get on it. But, how are you sleeping? How are you feeling? How's your energy? How are your workouts? Are you hitting PRs? Trying to focus more on those other wins. So if kind of the physical ones are taking more time, that we have other things to focus on. In my experience, with the right diet and the right programming and the right attitude, change is very possible somewhat quickly, not in an unhealthy way, but this is what you're doing, this is how we're going to make it better, without like literally reworking everything that's currently going on in their lives. But there's always people who sign up who seem really excited, and they have all these very big goals, and then they never do a workout. They never track their food for more than 2 days. And it's sad. Like I said, I want to help everyone, but I actually had to disconnect a bit in the beginning, because I was like, I can't. I just can't. I can't be the voice in their head that wakes them up and gets them excited to go put on a cute outfit and go to the gym, or whatever the equivalent of that for me is for them. And they have to be at a place where it's a lot of sacrifices to put yourself first and to put your health first. I've never, ever said that it was easy. And I feel like so many things now are so ingrained in me that I don't even think about it. So I do try to be very cognizant. There is nothing easy about being a little selfish in this arena, but I think it's very valuable for all of us. That's my answer.
Oh, don't be sorry. No, it's true. I mean, and a lot of times as a coach, it's this conscious effort to fight to put yourself back in the mindset of like, what was it like when I started? What was it like when I felt this way? Okay, so I gotta like, so stupid to say like my thinking cap. I'd hate when people said that. Thinking cap on, but I mean it's like true. You're like, okay, I'm gonna take my brain off and I'm gonna put, Sharon's brain on. And I'm gonna think about, well, why doesn't Sharon like her body? Why does Sharon pick herself apart? Where does Sharon get information? Who taught Sharon who's around Sharon? That's telling Sharon this information. Does she have an environment that she likes? I mean, I had this conversation with someone the other day. For weeks, it was about the activity had declined, and it was, well, the weather. Well, it's hot. Oh, well, it's the city. Oh, well, I don't have time. Oh, well, it's work. But digging into that question really ended up being that client doesn't like where they live, and they don't feel safe to go for walks, and they don't belong to a gym. And it's all of a sudden, it's not like, oh my gosh, you're a bad person. You don't want this for yourself. You don't have enough willpower. You don't do it. It's that you don't feel safe going for 7,000 steps.
Right.
So then all of a sudden, it's not even about nutrition, but it's like these questions that we need to ask ourselves as clients or as people who have goals. And then questions that we have to ask ourselves as coaches to the client to say, what are they going through?
Right. Right. Yeah. And I think when I do onboarding calls, one of the things I always say is like, please be honest with me. Because to your point, right, if I don't know that where you live isn't safe, I'm not going to assume that it's unsafe.
Because we're
If
not.
I don't know that you don't have a grocery store that you can go to buy fresh produce, I'm not going to assume that so I think sometimes I feel like I'm actually like really begging for TMI. I'm like, no, please tell me, please. So I can so I can actually do something about it, right? You don't feel comfortable walking? Okay, let's get you a jump rope. Or you don't even need to buy a jump rope. Let's do some jumping jacks. Let's, chase your little dog around who loves to play on the carpet. I think there's the beauty of this journey is that it can be so individualized. If you give someone like a coach the chance to help and to offer solutions. But to your point, they have to be willing to implement those solutions as well. And that's kind of the fine line, right, between really wanting something for someone and kind of letting them say, well, we're all adults here. This is the plan. This is as best as I can give it. I really want you to succeed. Please tell me how you are not able to do this. But, some people do just want to plan and to execute, and they're very happy with that. And that's also something that I ended up wanting for my coach. I realized that we had a timeline in my mind. And at a certain point, I wanted her to keep giving me the plan. And then that was it. And I didn't actually want any of the extra interaction. And that's okay too. Some of us need more accountability and a little more attention at different phases in the journey too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's not really too much different than that. I don't know if it's a joke, but kind of the idea with therapy, right? Your therapist only knows what you're going to tell them. And if you feed a bunch of bullshit, they're going to feed you back whatever bullshit you want to hear. Right? Like a coach or a mentor or a boss, or even your friend that you're trusting with that vulnerability, they're not there to tell you what you want to hear.
Right.
They're there to help problem solve with you and help you find solutions to the issues that you're facing and the adversities that you're facing. And a lot of times in coaching, it can feel as if you're a therapist and that you got to, again, take yourself out because you're really into that situation and that person and really invested in them. And you got to be like, I'm not your therapist. I'm your coach. I got to take a couple steps back. And this can happen, I think, when clients are in coaching for a longer period of time, to know them really well and they're comfortable with you. And they're like, well, I don't want to just talk about these things. I want to talk about these things.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. But fundamentally with our bodies and like getting strong and building muscle, and it's about the basics. Food, exercise, sleep. Right. I think sometimes it's really easy. You seem like a very passionate, involved person, and like much like myself, where you're just like, oh, I want this so bad. And then all of a sudden, wait, we can talk about this stuff, but is this really the issue that we're facing, or are these kind of the stories that we tell ourselves about why something is or isn't happening?
Right. And to your point, we really do have to remove ourselves, so for my younger clients, I sympathize greatly with when they say, I'm not comfortable moving calories up. And I'm like, I can remember this moment, like I feel it, but to your point, it's not my moment anymore, right? This is about them. And if anything, I might be doing them a disservice by constantly trying to push my experience. Oh no, it'll get better. It'll go better. It took me 8 months to get better. They might not have 8 months in the tank. They might not be willing to go, So I think we have to be realistic, but to your point, we have to be able to draw the line as well and say, I am qualified to help you with this. I really want to help you with this. Let me help you with this. But we can't do it all.
Well, and sometimes too, you get into this idea of, you're like motivating someone to achieve a goal they don't want to achieve, because they weren't honest in the process or not communicating that with you. So you're like rallying super hard for this person, and the person's just like further and further and further away. And then they get disconnected and you're like, wait, where did you go? We're doing everything for this thing. And then it turns out, well, it's like, you didn't even listen to me. That's not what I want.
Yeah.
Right. And so go ahead.
Oh no. So luckily I haven't had that yet.
Well, hopefully,
I'm sure it's coming.
You definitely hope to not have that. But sometimes that can be a coach thing, and sometimes that can be a client thing, right? Where like just expectations aren't clear.
Yeah.
And a lot of times it can create with some coaches that maybe aren't as qualified or aren't as experienced or don't have similar value systems to kind of what you're saying. Then they put it back on the client. And I'm sure there's someone, at least one person who's going to listen to this podcast or watch this recording that's like, I don't trust coaches.
Yep.
I don't trust nutrition coaches. They're all bullshit. You know, I don't trust nutritionists. I don't trust sports nutritionists. I don't trust trainers. I'm just going to do it on my own because it never worked for me. And similar to a gym, like let's remove that question. That's a tangent. But whoa. What would be some of the questions you recommend to someone who's looking for a coach who has a goal, or maybe doesn't know nutrition coaching is right for them or a coaching setting? What are some of the questions they should ask themselves when seeking a professional like yourself?
So I think they have to be realistic about the time commitment. Even if I have some clients who use meal prep services, they do not have the time to meal prep. I think you have to be realistic about where you're currently at, right? So you have to be able to say, I don't have time for this. Or, you know what, I do have time, but it's only to make X, Y, and Z. I wish I had an hour for the gym, but I really only have 45 minutes. Every night I have to make dinner for 4 children. I'm not, I'll measure my portion by when I spoon it into a bowl, but I'm not, making some plain dinner. I'm making it for them. So I think, once again, being honest, but also being realistic, because there's a difference between it's kind of that aspirational, oh yeah, I have an hour, but the gym's 20 minutes away. And if it's snowing, I'm probably not going to get out of bed on time. Sometimes my boss just schedules me. So it's actually, I had a bit of this going on. And I remember speaking with my sister and she was like, well, maybe they just don't actually have what they said, which wasn't actually where they are and actually what's possible. That's what they want. They want to have the hour, or they want to start meal tracking, but the reality is they're not there yet. And so trying to meet them, understand what I expect as a coach and any coach, and understand what they're bringing to the table in that sense, so we can actually determine if it would be a valuable relationship. Because I think both parties get very frustrated when you take someone on and then it feels like someone was deceived in some way, not intentionally. But I think it can be very hard, especially when we do tend to get more emotionally invested, which is a negative in some sense, right? And actually have to take a step back and say, okay, this is what you told me. I'm going to make a plan based on this. I can make a plan based on this, but this is what I expect of you. And I think with coaches, it's really about having that good vibe between you, because honestly, someone can be really smart and have a lot of credentials, but if they're not willing to take the time to speak with you, or you don't feel comfortable talking to them about how gassy you are, then where is this going? What's actually the best outcome for you in this situation? And I think sometimes with social media, we can get this, oh, I want to look like you, or, oh, I want to perform like you. But we also want to make sure that we can communicate as well, because so many of these things we're taught to not talk about, right? Not talk about how horrible our periods are, how gassy we are, how bad our acne is, whatever it might be. And I think for me, it was always about making sure that people could speak to me about things like that, but also because no one has to live with stuff like that. But once again, if you don't tell me, I can't help you.
Oh, it's true. And what we think is normal may not be normal. It might be common. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's the right thing for you and your body, and unless you really want to put yourself out there and talk about it, who's supposed to know? Your coach isn't a mind reader.
Right. And I think sometimes it can be information overloads, not even from a social media standpoint, but from a data perspective, right? You could go on Amazon right now. You could order a gut health test. You could order a DNA test. You could order, I read something the other day. I couldn't believe it was an option. But basically you can overload yourself with what your genetics, your body, should be doing, how you should be training, how you should be eating. And I think sometimes we do get ourselves tripped up a bit by getting too much information too fast and then saying, I don't know what to do with this. I got a DEXA scan, it says this. I got an allergy test, it says this. But actually, I don't really feel all that, I don't feel that poorly when I do this, even though it says. And I think sometimes we just want someone to say, okay, well, if I were you, maybe we should do this first, and then maybe we should try that. We should keep this on the back burner. It's really good to know, but if it's not actually applicable to your life, just because that's what the test says, then let's take it with a grain of salt. Also, the accuracy of some of these tests is just not there. But so I think that can also, I like to come from a data perspective, and sometimes that can be worse if the client has already kind of done a fair amount of investigating on themselves on their own, and just don't really know where to turn.
Totally. That's even too like wearing a watch or like a data tracker. It's like itch my head. I whoop. But it's like, how did you sleep? And the client, well, my watch said that I slept good. And you're like, okay, try this again.
Yeah.
Sarah, how did you sleep? And they're like, well, it says my recovery is really good. And you're like, Sarah, I don't care what your watch says. I want to know, do you feel refreshed? Do you feel like you slept good? Did you have any dreams? Did you wake up and pee? Do you get hot? Like all these questions that this data, we can use it, right? We can say like, okay, the trend in your recovery is that when you drink, it's dog shit. Okay, we know that. So let's use that to an advantage. It's in the red. Wonderful.
Right.
But we get into this idea of like overruling our actual cues and like what our big old brains are telling us and what our big old bodies are telling us. And they're very, very smart mechanisms that are there for us, kind of like the bloating or the inflammation thing, you know? Yeah. And it's like, we can use that, but setting the right expectation that like we can have all of these baselines, but there's not one thing that's going to tell us besides how you feel. Right. But then going back to the argument of, well, I feel this food is good for me. Right. So this is where, if you guys are listening to this and you're feeling like confused and you're like, wait, they already said, don't feel like this. And they said, feel like that. These are the types of questions we just want to start provoking some thought with, and where a coach can streamline this information.
Right.
And where someone who can lay a program out for you and lay out the next steps and ask you thought-provoking questions so that you can ask yourself and provide that answer. At the end of the day, like, this sounds kind of bad, but like, I don't care what the answer is on some things because I need you to care about it. We want you to understand what that means to you. Like being constipated doesn't hurt my body. It hurts yours.
Right.
And if you don't want to feel that way, we will provide you, Sarah will provide you with tools so that you don't have unhappy poops. But if you're not willing to talk about poops in the first place, then a tumbling cycle of you're just going to feel like shit and we don't know why. And then we think,
Yeah, I think all the trackers and I hear all the time, my watch says I burned 500 calories. Should I be eating that back?
Ooh.
Like, are you hungry? How many calories does it say you should be eating? Because if it's, and we get into those conversations, once again, they're so granular, right? And to your point, like we're kind of missing the big picture. The scale trackers, watches, they're all valuable pieces of data at a given moment in time, right? But how we use them is really what's important, and also taking them with a grain of salt, because the technology just isn't that fantastic. But also, just because your watch says you only burn 1,300 calories doesn't mean that you actually don't require 1,800, or that the activity that you're about to put yourself through doesn't require more, or your goals of growing your glutes don't require more. And I think so many people want this like very black and white. I get all the time, how much should I be eating? I can't just give that to you. I mean, I could, right? But it would be irresponsible. But so I think, making things so black and white is just where we tend to get into trouble. There's value in all these different data points, but how we use them really needs to be appropriate for our lives, and not letting them necessarily make the decisions for us, but showing us maybe an alternative path too.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and that too, like if speaking on the data thing, I guess this is just my pet peeve, but it's cool to do tests, right? Like let's say you do an allergy test for food, but recognizing the margin of error and recognizing that it's just a piece of information to get you to the next step, right? So somebody comes in the coaching and they're like, I have a lactose allergy. I don't eat any lactose. I'm like, great. Did you go to the doctor and get a lactose allergy test? And they're like, no. And I'm like, do you know how that's collected? And they're like, no. But I did this test from Amazon, or I did this test from Kit or whatever. I'm like, great. Okay. There's a difference between an allergy and an aversion. There's a difference between having the gut health and the microbiota to digest that thing. Right. And it's like finding out those things that there will always be kind of a step further in the clinical world. Just because we have access to these things, like we can order any of our own labs, doesn't mean that you reading them versus reading a doctor is the same thing.
Right. But I also think self-diagnosing can be tricky. To your point, right? Some of us might use our aversion to dairy or our fear of gluten to say we're gluten-free. That's what, what I tend to, when someone tells me they can't process gluten, and I say, do you go to a bakery and get a piece of sourdough bread? Because if you can eat a fresh piece of sourdough bread, then I don't think it's gluten. I think it's the food additives of the bread you're buying from the grocery store that's filled with sugar and all these gums and carrageenan and all these, it's not the gluten. But I think also there's nothing wrong with saying, I don't want to eat that if it's within coming from a healthy standpoint, right? You don't have to eat pork. You don't have to eat dairy. You don't have to eat acai because it's trendy. But you also want to make sure that we're getting enough micronutrients with our macros, and we're like having some food diversity for our microbiome, if not for anything else, right? We can take all the supplements in the world, but if we're not getting everything our body needs, it's always going to be something's always going to feel off.
For sure. What do you recommend for somebody who has never lifted before, who wants to get started? What are some of the things, like mentally, emotionally, that someone walks through that keeps them from the gym? Is it like the anxiety of sitting in the parking lot wondering to go in? Is it not having a plan? Is it you don't know what you're doing? Is it looking a certain way? Talk to us a little bit more about what you see commonly within your community about going to the gym.
So I found for my clients and for my own personal experience, starting at home is a great way to start. If you have the motivation to wake up and to do it, even in your tiny New York apartment, or do it in your living room while your baby is sleeping, right? If you have the motivation, start there, because you're going to feel the most comfortable in your home. You can wear whatever you want, and presumably you have access to regulate the temperature. You'll have food nearby. There's a lot of the toilet, right? There's a lot of these things that we kind of take for granted when we're really uncomfortable. Those matter. So if you're in an outfit you're uncomfortable in, you don't know where the bathroom is, feel like everyone's staring at you, how are you going to lift well? How are you going to be focusing on proper form? So I think gaining confidence at home can be really valuable. Now, for some people, that's just not going to be possible, or the ability to wake up and be excited to work out at home won't be there. So also, I will say, I think results can often come a little faster in a gym because we have access to more equipment where we can move more weight once we are comfortable. I will say that everyone is a beginner. No one is judging you or staring at you, because we're all too obsessed looking at ourselves and how good or bad we think we look. So and even in the situations where I've actually caught someone staring at me, for better or for worse, were they doing it 3 seconds later? No. Even if it's a gym I go to all the time, have I ever thought about it again? I think we can get so in our own heads about what we're looking like, but the reality is that we all start somewhere, and every day you put off that start is a disservice to you. And people are always going to say something awful. It's always going to be true. You can have the most beautiful squat, and a trainer could still come up to you and say, that looked like shit. Your knees caved in, you weren't breathing and bracing, right? Someone is always going to have an opinion. So you kind of have to say, you want to control some variables, right? You want to go somewhere where you're comfortable. I've heard horror stories about women going to gyms where men are just they don't let them even exercise without feeling harassed. We don't want that. We want a safe, happy gym environment that's clean, preferably, but where you're comfortable in, and try and really tune out the world, whatever music that means for you, but also having a program, right? I hear stories all the time of, just go on a piece of cardio equipment until you figure out what to do. Well, no, right? Because the second we get off that machine, we're a deer in the headlights. And if someone takes our machine, if we planned this all out and someone takes it, then we're like, I don't know what to do, we might leave. So I think having a program of some kind can be really helpful for those moments, potentially starting at home. I think starting with a friend, a partner, a family member is great, but we don't want to learn to rely on that person. And we don't always know what might happen with them. Even a family member, right? They might get a job and need to move away. It's not always, something terrible. So I think learning to motivate and show up for yourself. Constantly reminding yourself we all start from somewhere, but also not being afraid to ask for help. Like most gyms have free training sessions. Take advantage of stuff like that. Ask for someone to, show you how to use the leg press. Even if you're actually not new to a gym in general, but you're new to a specific gym, right? I don't know how to use every machine. There are plenty of times where I'm like fussing with the seat and someone comes over and like, so I think just trying to be patient, reminding yourself this is about you, and you're the one that has to be okay with your choices. So if you're constantly pushing it off until the next day and constantly being frustrated, whether that's to go to a gym or go to see a nutritionist, you're the one who has to sit with that. And criticism is hard to sit with, but most of the time we can handle it. In my experience, most people are a lot stronger. And when someone does correct your form or speaks, comments, take it with a grain of salt, right? Because you might not actually care what that person's feedback is. Maybe you do. Maybe they're genuinely trying to be helpful and that they communicated it wrong. But you have a right to be there. You just have to start.
Well, it's that idea of like taking up space. And like, even though you might not know the right question, you might not know where to go. You might not know what to say if somebody does offend you.
Right.
You deserve to be there just as much as they do. You don't need to slink away and be like, oh my gosh, she said something. I gotta go.
Yeah.
You don't need to leave. And we need to normalize this idea or encourage others and ourselves, myself included, normalize being uncomfortable. Normalize being in an uncomfortable situation. Your ass moves, okay? Your skin wiggles. Everyone wiggles. You take a video of yourself and you got dimples all over. Great. That's a body. You have one. Yeah. Congratulations. You know what I mean? Like, that's another thing is like normalizing being a beginner. Everybody sucks at something. We didn't just like, oh, this is a rant for me, but it's like so much as a kid, we just sucked ass at everything. And what did we do? We just kept doing it. Every day we'd go in the playground and try to figure out how to swing and eat shit on the ground and scrape it and be like, oh, I'm going to do it again. We didn't say like, I'm never doing this again. I made an ass of myself. How could I possibly do this? And then you leave.
Right.
But so often as an adult, it's okay to do those things. It's okay to like slink away and play small and not take up space and not go back. And your partner moves. So, well, there goes the gym. I didn't go because, it's my trainer's fault. They quit their job.
Right.
It is not their fault that you stop showing up.
Right.
It is not someone else's problem that you feel uncomfortable in your leggings or your shorts and that you walked in the gym and now you are going to keep yourself from leg day because you don't want to go look at yourself in the mirror. And it's a lot of this idea of like, if you touched on it too, if you don't know how to do something, Google it. Nobody in the gym gives a shit if you're looking at how to do pendlay rows, how to do how to do lunges, how to stand up straight, how to whatever, how complicated or uncomplicated your question is on your phone. Nobody's looking at your phone.
Right.
And honestly, like if I see someone Googling something or I see somebody asking someone, I say, you know what? Props to them because A, that shit's hard.
Right.
B, they want to do it correctly. They want to be safe. They want to know how to do it. They want to learn. They're receptive to it. And that's why they're here. We're all here to get better.
Right.
And, even if you see someone like Sarah or, myself, maybe you go into the gym and you make these presumptions, oh, they're buff. They got delts. They know what they're doing. They don't want to talk to anybody. You know what I mean? They're not going to help me. That's it. Like, we're all there for so many different reasons,
Yeah, I think that's also really important to remember that not everyone goes for aesthetics. Some people go for their mental health. But to your point, I think it's really important to shop for gyms. Like I don't, just because there's one 5 minutes from your house doesn't mean that that's the right location for you. It's, like it's an investment in yourself. Gyms can be a variety of different price points. I know that. But I think giving yourself a chance to find somewhere that you actually like is really important. Like I go to a further gym because of the vibe there. And yes, I'm comfortable in the gym, but I go because it's worth it once I'm there. And I think that sometimes we can say, oh, well, this is the only option. And sometimes I want to say, is it though? Is it? Of course, sometimes we live in very small towns and there is only one gym and it closes at 5 and that's the hand that we've been dealt. But I think not being afraid to shop around, to find something that makes you feel comfortable, whatever that might be. Also, maybe going at a different time. I have some clients who specifically go at the most empty time. They made friends with the owner and they said, when is it empty here? And that works for them. Their schedule allows that. Not everyone's schedule allows that. But use everything you have at your disposal to get comfortable. Because ultimately, if you're comfortable, you're going to be more confident and you're going to go try that leg press because no one's on it finally and you want a shot at it. Or you're going to try to do front squats even though you've never ever done them. When we're comfortable, we have a little more confidence. But also, to your point, showing up, even if we're like, I don't feel like it, or I'm bloated, or I'm this, or I'm that. Giving yourself a chance to get to that confidence, to get comfortable, because a lot of people don't even give themselves that chance. And that's really, when you can walk into a gym and feel like you're in your play area, like as a kid, that's what we want. It could take 30 days. It could take 60 days. For some people, it could take 6 months. But you have to give yourself a chance to get there.
Totally. And when we get comfortable to get uncomfortable, that's when we change. That's when you open up the doors to the possibility and the opportunity of applying your mind and your body and improving yourself. Right. And that's a pursuit. And some days you go in and you're just like, man, I'm here. And that's got to be good enough. I was like doing some front squats and I was like, today, maybe today is just going to feel physically not good. So I'm going to listen to my body and I'm going to be flexible with it, know? And another point that came up with somebody not that long ago was that you can have the best plan, but you got to have a backup plan. Yeah. So like if you're going to go at the busiest times, you're stacked up against the odds.
Right.
For some God-given reason, everybody's doing legs on a Tuesday and you got to do legs on a Tuesday. You can ask yourself, am I going to do legs on a Tuesday and be flexible with my methods and not do it in a line? Or am I going to switch it up? Do I need to talk to my coach? Do I need to do chest today? Because apparently nobody's doing chest. Right. Or am I willing to be patient and mix up my routine and go to the squat machine when it's available?
Yeah.
And those things come with time. You're not going to know those things right away. And that's where having a program, having online personal training, and having a coach can come in handy and be like, coach, shit, what do I do?
Yeah.
Whereas other times you start to kind of learn and then you're just like, well,
yeah.
I really like leg extensions. I'm going to move them to Thursday because I was here for an hour and a half and they didn't open them the whole time. And that's okay.
Right. Yeah. Having a plan is important. Having someone that you can, if you want that in a coach, to be able to say the leg press is taken, what do I do? Not every coach will be available to you in that capacity. So once again, being honest that this is something that I need, right? If it's not going to be a Zoom session, then will you respond to me in a timely fashion? Obviously, if you're available. And then I think the other thing that is important, not just for women, but for anyone in the gym, in any new setting, you don't have to pretend to be someone you're not. You don't have to be like Susie Cream Cheese and like smiling and saying hi to everyone at the gym. But remember what it felt like to be a beginner and crack a smile. Like whenever I see someone new, a new face at a gym I go to frequently, I smile. It's the nice thing to do. And little things like that, I think sometimes we're like, oh, but I'm not in the mood, or I feel, I don't want them to think I'm hitting on them, or that I need to be their friend because they're the only other girl. No, you can just smile and be friendly, and that can be enough. You can, and so not forgetting like kind of the basic like human decency there. We all are here for ourselves, but without a comfortable gym environment, then that goes away.
Yeah. And to seek it. I mean, most of the time there's options. And if there's not, advocate for yourself. Advocate, ask yourself, what do I want and how am I going to get it? I think that's the difference between a proactive and a reactive approach, right? A fixed mindset and a growth mindset. Sarah, I know you talk about this with your clients. I'm just learning more about you. I know you do. So, a fixed mindset is where it's just like, oh, well, this is the way it is. The chest machine is taken. I'm doomed. And that's when you leave. That's when you leave the gym and decide, I am going to be reactive to my situation. And well, that's the end of that. I didn't get a workout in because of somebody else, because of the bench, Whereas like proactive is like, well, that sucks. I really wanted to do that. I was in my plan today, but I guess I'm going to have to do something else. And I'm not going to leave till I feel like I have applied myself, or same thing with food. Like, what are some of the like proactive, reactive, growth mindset, fixed mindset things you see within like the nutrition side?
I think saying, oh, I think the meal prep can be tough. So I don't have time for that. Okay, what local services do you have? Do you want to try something like a factor service, or is there someone in town? Actually, I keep hearing this more and more of small businesses that will make food for someone's specific macros. But even if that's not possible, right? Okay, you don't have time to meal prep, but you like chicken, and there's rotisserie chicken around the block. So maybe buy one of those every week. You like potatoes, but you don't have an oven that works. Okay, let's buy the microwavable potatoes. So I think sometimes we don't realize that nutrition can be more simple. I don't want to spend money on fresh fish every day. Okay, great, buy frozen. Strawberries are too expensive in New York. I know. Buy frozen or go out of the state and bring them back in, which is what I do. But no, I think sometimes we create these barriers and we think we can't have it. But ultimately what we're actually saying is, I don't deserve to have this. I don't deserve to have this opportunity. I don't have, we might say, I don't have the money to eat that way. And I say, well, actually my grocery bill has never been lower. Or, you can balance going out to eat with hitting your macros and performing in the gym if you have a plan. If you know that if you want to order, sushi, okay, great. Let's just add some edamame. Let's add some more sashimi with it, so we can balance out the carbs. Carbs are not bad, but we don't want, we want to get our protein too. So I think a lot of times we have these narratives in our minds about what food should or shouldn't be, what our food can or can't be. I could never eat like you. I could never spend this much time. Well, okay, but what can you do? Because most of us can go buy a rotisserie chicken, maybe steam some vegetables in the microwave, and, maybe make a sauce once every 2 weeks that we keep in the fridge. I think setting the barrier to entry, not as saying as low as possible sounds bad, but it's almost like that. I actually have to remind them that this is where we need to be. You're just right here. Like the space is very small, but the little bit of effort can really make a big difference. And a lot of what I do with my clients is we go through and we look for food additives. So everyone consumes processed foods. And in America, I could talk about that for a whole other session. But I think learning to read the ingredient labels can be really confusing and really hard. And we can become overwhelmed with, well, this has this and this has this, which is better? Like, let's scrap that. Let's go back to basics. You want oatmeal? Let's make oatmeal. Don't buy the pre-made oatmeal. I know it will take 2 extra minutes or 5 extra minutes, but let's do it right. And because that's actually going to be more beneficial for you. And I think we say, I'm busy, I'm this, I'm that, but then we are constantly in pain. We're constantly from, whether it's bloating, whether it's headaches from under eating, right? From overtraining, from not resting. So it comes to a point where you have to say something's got to give. And I think a lot of the times it's easier to take those few minutes up front, just like in a gym setting where we might not be comfortable yet. At least have a plan. You don't have to do it for the rest of your life. Just have something, right? Just like go buy what the food you do have access to, and let's work with that and take it 1 week at a time. The fact that you don't have to do this for the rest of your life, I think, can be forgotten. We want to do things roughly for a few months, but it doesn't have to be 6 months, and it doesn't have to be 9 months. 2 or 3 months in the course of our lives, if we're lucky, is nothing.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And like that investment into yourself and like learning how to make yourself a priority.
Yeah.
There's that quote that says, tell yourself it's not a priority and see how that feels.
Right.
And that's kind of like the tough love approach, but
right. Yeah.
I had a conversation with a client the other day and it was like, well, I have to work. I said, okay, well, legally you get a half an hour lunch break by law. Like at this point I was like, I was kind of up in a tree and I had to give tough love. And I was like, okay, great. You live in X state. You have an hour and 2 15-minute breaks that you get to use by law. And they're like, I know what the laws are for employment. You don't have to tell me that. And I was like, well, I think I do because you're not taking advantage of them. And if I were your boss legally, I would have to give them to you or else you could sue me.
Right.
Right. And like, kind of, they were like, what are you getting at? I don't need to know this. And I said, what I'm getting at is that the law for yourself should be that you go eat lunch.
Right.
And you don't need to take that whole hour. You just need to bite something.
Right.
One nibble of walk away from your computer, go put something in your mouth and see how it feels. Right.
Right.
And like, sometimes we got to go there. Sometimes we got to say, you are not a priority. Eating food to you is not important. So why are you here?
Right.
You're here because you want something different for yourself, right? You're here because you want to feel better. Something needs to change because nothing's changing. It is my job, like, as your coach, to keep you accountable to that. Other times it's like, you know, did you see a butterfly on your walk today?
Right. But yeah, I mean, to your point, I think so often we're told we have to have a goal, right? Whatever it is with our career. Okay, what's the job? Where are you going? If you're in the gym lifting like a bodybuilder, oh, so you're going to compete. If you're in the gym lifting like a powerlifter, oh, so you're going to compete. If you're playing chess on the weekend, oh, are you a professional chess player? And so often we get kind of sucked into, we have to have this goal. The thing with the goal is that it's a lot easier to set our sights on that, right? It's a lot easier to say, I'm training for this, I'm running for this, I'm making all these sacrifices now for this. Mm-hmm. But the reality is, what we're actually asking of our clients is the goal is life. The goal is longevity. The goal is aging as gracefully as possible and like being as healthy in whatever way that, manifests for all of us. So actually, what I'm actually asking you to do is to make a million small sacrifices until you can't do that anymore. So I think sometimes, but we can always just come out and say that. Actually, this isn't for the next 6 months. This is for the rest of your life. If you would choose, if you can imagine this possibility of a world where you can go out to dinner with your fiance and you can order exactly what you want off the menu. You can have a killer workout with your best friend or, your mom a few days later, right? You can have this job that you love. I think that's unfortunately the reality. It's big picture. It's a lot of sacrifice, but it's all worth it. And when we start to see these little moments of, oh, this is what she means, or the coach, right? Or this is what they're talking about when they say, this is what lifting to failure actually feels like. Like, I feel like I could lift a car. Or this is what fueling your body actually feels like when you wake up and you're just, nothing hurts. Your knees, the running, the knees are fine. The hips are fine. You're not having this searing headache. I think those are the moments where we really want our clients to say, this is why I'm doing it. To some degree, we're not all going to have those massive moments of, oh, thank God I've healed from this eating disorder. Thank God I've recovered from this car crash. And, those, whatever that moment looks like, I really try to celebrate it, because that moment might be everything to that person, but it also might be exactly what they need to keep going and to keep putting themselves first. Once again, how we put ourselves first now could be very different than in the future. But the point is that we keep doing it, and it can evolve and change, but we keep doing it because we're worth it. And the people around us tend to see that, and they tend to want some of that too.
Yeah. Oh, Sarah, you hit it. It's so, I'm like sitting here. For our audio listeners, you probably can't see my silly face right now, but I'm like lit up, and Sarah's lit up too, because when you understand fundamental principles of nutrition and fitness, and when you have gone through some shit yourself, and then you want to share that with other people, this is like the type of coach you want to find. This is the type of person you want to align yourself with, because they're going to be there to pick you up when you fall. They're going to be there to say, keep going. They're going to be there to be your cheerleader, to keep you accountable, to give you tough love, and also just love, And the reason why is because we see what you're not giving yourself. And all those things that a coach is going to give you are to teach you how to give yourself self-respect, how to prioritize yourself, how to lift yourself up, how to pick yourself up when you fall. And a good coach is going to do that for you. And that doesn't mean, if you want to be a bodybuilder, great. We or someone else, maybe someone more aligned, can help you do that. Or if you have that, that's great. That might be what gets you started, but that might not be what keeps you going. Right. And health is a continuum, and you're one of the best projects you could work on. And if there's anything to take from this podcast, it's like, you are worth your time. You are worth your respect. You are worth feeding. you are worth loving.
Right.
You are worth trying and getting uncomfortable and getting sweaty and grunting and doing all the things that you think are silly, and video yourself and watching your body shake and watching what it can do through time, and measuring that progress is not restrictive. I think that's another big thing, Sarah, you said, is like macros are not restrictive. It's data, and when we have data to pull from, we can say, do my feelings match this situation? Should I feel like shit about myself? Because if I look at the data from the last week, I did everything I was supposed to. And maybe today my brain is playing games with me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And to your point, showing up every day, it could be 5 minutes. It could be 2 hours. Like, don't think that you have to go balls to the wall for it to count or for it to matter. Taking those 5 minutes, if you have it, is what gets you consistent, and what gives you that discipline to say, okay, I have 5 minutes, that's better than nothing, instead of saying, oh, it's already ruined. Right? Really being able to take advantage of everything that we have, and being grateful for those moments too, because unfortunately at a certain point, I'm sure in all of our lives, we will be told that we cannot do the thing that we want to do, hopefully only temporarily. To actually like acknowledge that right now we can do the things we love and we're able to, so we should do them, even if it is just for 5 minutes.
I can't say it any better than that. I really can't. And Sarah, it's been such a joy to be able to sit down with you and have you as a guest today, for our listeners, for our watchers, for your community, for the Swolverine, the Swole Kitchen. I mean, and this might be kind of funny to you guys too, if you know me or if you know Sarah individually. I mean, we're both business owners. We're both coaches. We're both nutritionists. We're both sports nutritionists. We both are competitive athletes. Like, we both do really similar things in similar ways, but in our own world. And if that can prove to you a lot of what we're saying, go find your environment, go find your people, ask questions, seek out resources. The right people will be there for you. And truthfully, like, I don't see Sarah as a competitor. Sarah is another person in the fitness space that is like-minded, and we are here for the community. And we're here to help you through our unique experiences and through our education and through our continuing education and experience to elevate the community, rise the tide for all the boats. Right? And if you can use this situation as a way to remember, when you go in the gym, that girl is not your competition.
Right.
That guy is not your competition. That person you follow on social media is not your competition.
You from high school isn't your competition.
Exactly. And that competition is you, and proving to yourself that I am better than yesterday. And that my actions serve what I want to earn for myself, right? And you earn your own self-respect. And I don't know. Sarah, it's been so cool. Thank you
so much for having me.
Oh my gosh, yeah. And so how do people find you? I guess I'll interject here. Sarah's handle on Instagram is at strong.by.sarah with a H. So SARAH. So make sure to go follow her. But how do people get in contact with you? Do they DM you? Do they go to a website? Do they schedule a call?
So I do all my onboarding, social media, everything myself. So yes, you can DM me. I do check them quite frequently. It's very important to me to be in communication. But I do have a website, strong-by-sarah.com. So getting our punctuation in here. But I'm available on Instagram. I do show up on TikTok. I am more of an Instagram girl. But you can email me as well. At the bottom of my website, there's a link to send me an email. And whatever capacity I could help anyone better their nutrition or their fitness, I would love the opportunity.
Absolutely. That's so cool. Oh, Sarah, thank you so much. To our viewers, to our listeners, thank you for chiming in. Here on the Swole Friends podcast, we get to sit down with amazing people like Sarah, who are there to help you take your fitness and nutrition and overall lifestyle to the next level. We go live on our podcast multiple times a week, every week. We record these live on YouTube, as well as post the audio to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Twitch, all that fun stuff. So make sure to subscribe, and we'll catch you guys next time.